Burger King. But welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
Sometimes the Hasbara, it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Being kind is the guys in this mess in the first place.
Put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, banking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Hello, and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. How's everybody doing today, chat? I have something different today. I've been always kind of looking around for something new to put in there to avoid getting into too much of a rut on anything in particular. And I was looking at a thread that was started by somebody I follow on Twitter by the name of Show Your Work. And I just dropped that. Show us your work. On these, like, essentially the whole YIMBY property developer lobby thing, and this whole idea that actually all we need to do is, if we just deregulate construction and kind of let landlords do whatever and developers do whatever, then rent will go down because there will be more housing. You know, like how there are way more vacant housing units than there are people who have no place to live right now, and everything is ridiculously expensive. Well, they think that if it were more so, then it would be less so. So anyway, in this thread that Show Your Work had was putting together the other day, there was a video by Libertarians.org, the YouTube channel Libertarians.org, and I thought, I've never heard of these jabronis. I mean, like, I've heard of libertarians, right, libertarians, I mean, but not this particular YouTube channel, and apparently this was really quite bad, on the subject of something called public choice theory, which I was just reading up very briefly on. I mean, it is like sort of one of the theoretical underpinnings of neoliberal ideology, though I had not really heard of the term before this, not to have actually really read anything specifically about it, but I was sort of reading up on it a little bit so that I would have some idea what I was getting into, even though I have not actually... I basically never look at the videos in advance that I show on here. So anyway, we have from libertarianism.org in public choice theory. And apparently, so we're going to just look at this and see what this bullshit's about. I mean, the short version of this is about, like, the marketization of basically everything, and essentially just depoliticizing the idea of any kind of political choice. Wow, this music tells me, I mean, it is really expressive music, and it tells me my call is very important to somebody and will be answered in the order in which it was received.
Public choice economists in particular is a school of economics called public choice. It means you study public choice. Normally...
Wow, okay, so that's already very informative. So it's called public choice, and that's because they study public choice. Wow, I couldn't have put that together from the name.
Economic studies private choice. How do you decide what job to take, what human capital to develop, what products you will buy? Public choice is about how we make decisions through government. Public choice economists talk about rational ignorance. They talk about the concept of concentrated benefits and diffuse costs. We're getting back to the special interest case there. What are concentrated benefits and diffuse costs? Well, the idea is that...
Oh, he's got a Cato Institute mug. Of course he does.
Any government program...
Hello, Riveroon.
The benefits are going to be concentrated on a relatively limited number of people. It could be major oil companies. It could be Wall Street banks.
Hello, Phoenix Rising. How you doing?
Could be all the corn farmers in America. It could be...
I mean, you're just describing capitalism.
People who work in textile companies who are going to be protected from competition. It could be all the elderly who are going to get a rise in their Social Security benefits, but it's very, very unlikely to be all the people. And so,
well, which is really interesting because, of course, the elderly is, of course, a totally discrete group of people. Like, there's nobody going into that group. There's nobody going out of that group. It's just an island. If you do something to help all the elderly, that doesn't help anybody else. It doesn't, like, help the people who might be close to them and that might feel the need to help support them because their pensions aren't actually covering the cost of living. No. It's only benefiting the elderly. Hola, Tomás.
benefits are concentrated
Estábamos viendo unos hueones Chicago Boy.
on these people. The costs are diffused across all the taxpayers or all the consumers. If we put protectionist measures on textiles so that clothes that you buy are more expensive, those costs don't show up on the government's books. They're not a cost to the taxpayer. They're a cost to all the consumers who want to buy.
Well, see, we already have. I love this idea that apparently the taxpayers and the consumers are two totally different groups. Like, it isn't that sometimes we buy, that we are people, and sometimes we go and buy shit, and then I guess we are consumers. And sometimes we work on shit, and then we are workers. And then sometimes we go pay taxes on shit, and then we are taxpayers. No. The consumers and the taxpayers, like the elderly, are just discrete categories.
Buy clothes, especially.
I heard the assholes got run out of Columbia Heights metro station the other day. That was nice to see.
Inexpensive clothes. So the benefits are concentrated, the costs are diffused among 300 million people, and that makes it very hard.
Yeah, well, and they already, okay, so in that example, he's talking about protectionist measures that he says protect people who work in the textile industry. And the idea is that if you help people who work in the textile industry, that only helps people who work in the textile industry. Not, say, people whose incomes depend, at least in part, on the spending behavior of people who work in the textile industry. Like, maybe if people who work in the textile industry have better incomes or whatever, I guess that's the idea here. Although that isn't... protection, that doesn't really fall. It's more people who own textile mills, or textile firms anyway, who would be benefiting from that, not so much the people who work in them, except to the extent of, preserving their employment, if that's the issue. So I guess, forget what I just said. Okay. But, okay, a lot of people benefit when workers have money, though. Literally everybody whose job, and therefore their income and livelihood, depend on workers buying stuff. So, we just the first thing that you already just get, it's there's no overlap. There are these discrete categories, And this is something I was noticing when I was just reading a write-up on this stuff in the first place. Like, they can't... They can't conceive of people as actually fulfilling multiple roles, of people having relationships with each other, because they're libertarians. They don't do relationships. I mean, look at this guy.
Those people. How much does the sugar quota cost every sugar consumer in America? $1, $5? Not enough to learn about it and write your congressman. How much does it benefit the 1 or 2 sugar companies in the United States? A lot. So who hires lobbyists? The sugar companies do. Who hires lobbyists on the trade bill? Mostly unions and protectionist companies that want to be protected from foreign competition. There are a lot of...
God, I mean, this is... Okay, yeah, this is the other thing, because this is a... like, fundamentally a liberal economic doctrine, it can't conceive really of structural power. So everything goes through lobbies. And of course, I mean, like, for example, the unions, I mean, they're clearly workers just as powerful as the companies that their members work for.
Other analyses of the way this works. One is called the Iron Triangle. The idea there
is a book by Finnish thriller author Leena Lehtolainen called Rautakolmio, The Iron Triangle.
The Iron Triangle is the congressional committee that oversees a program, the bureaucrats who administer it, and the special interests who benefit from it.
I mean, and this term, special interests, if you listen to the way he was describing special interests, I mean, this just reminds me of, like, something I read by Chomsky ages ago. Like, probably one of the first things I read by him. He was talking about this term, the special interests. And he was talking about when you actually get into concrete detail of what the special interests are, it turns out it's all of us, really. It's just people. It's mostly working people. Like, the special interests, it's like workers in various industries. It's, you know, poor people. It's black people. It's, you know, queer people. It's like any group of people who have needs and need to, like, protect themselves and stuff like that, which is kind of everybody. And the way he's doing this, I mean, because remember, the special interest, it's like the elderly, people, textile workers. He can't conceive of textile companies, apparently. Well, I mean, actually, he did sound like he did. But, I mean, the idea that actually all these things are somehow related.
And political scientists talk about a revolving door between these people. The congressional committee writes the law, then some of the staff members of that congressional committee go over and implement the law at the regulatory agency, and then when they're ready to start making money to send their kids to college, they go get hired out as a lobbyist for the special interests that are benefited from it. Or, alternatively, a special interest group, the oil industry, the corn farmers, whatever, comes up with an idea for a law, they lobby the congressional committee.
Oh, I mean, and the whole thing is presented here as if, like, this lobbying, there were equal power. Like, anyone who lobbies, it's all just somebody lobbied. You know, it's like the people who try to reduce, like, U.S. support for Zionist apartheid in Palestine and genocide and the rest of it, down to, oh, it must just be the Israel lobby doing it. Somebody lobbied them, or something like that. And it's like, I mean, that isn't how that works either. But, like, watching, like, all of politics be reduced to this is...
and then they get a point...
I mean, you can see where they manage it, because fundamentally, the people who come up with this sort of public choice bullshit are very much coming from microeconomics. They are looking at everything in this world of sort of individual transactional choice. And
to the bureaucracy that will oversee it, because after all, who knows the business better? It's logical to hire regulatory administrators who know something about the corn, the oil, the technology.
yeah, I mean, and it is quite logical for those companies because it's handy if the people regulating you are people who have a massive conflict of interest and are like naturally going to be favorably disposed to you.
Whatever. So you get a revolving door back and forth between the policy makers, the policy implementers, and the policy beneficiaries.
I like how he has his book sitting out in front of him.
Milton Friedman talked about the tyranny of the status quo. And what he meant there,
I mean, he knew something about tyranny. Ask people in Chile.
was, we may argue a lot over whether a program ought to be implemented. I mean, we talked about national health insurance for 40, 50 years.
And most people would like to see that implemented.
Still moving in that direction, but we haven't entirely gone there.
We're not really moving in that direction, though. In fact, I mean, one of the things the ACA was supposed to do was prevent movement in that direction, in part by banning any movement in that direction at the state level.
So we have debates before we pass laws. But
Do
once
we?
the law is passed, Friedman says, then the tyranny of the status quo kicks in. Nobody ever says 1 year later, 4 years later, okay, was that law a good idea? Maybe not. Let's get rid of it. Never get rid of these laws.
That's not true. Like, look at Glass-Steagall, which I have to say, within the context of like a capitalist system, was a pretty good idea. It stabilized things somewhat by not having the sort of the casino nature of investment banking completely just flow into they created a separation between like commercial banking and speculative investment banking. It did provide some stabilization, and then actually the ruling class said, yeah, actually that's a bad idea. We want Wall Street to regulate itself. Or say having a social safety net. Workers fought and died to have a social safety net in this country, and then the ruling class said, actually that's a bad idea. We're going to get rid of that, and so now we don't really have one. I mean, so, yeah, Milton Friedman was full of shit on many things, and this is not an exception.
So once the law gets implemented, it stays there forever. There's no government manual on how to close down a government agency, because why would you need one? They never close anything down.
Yeah, they fucking do. I mean, lots of agencies have been closed down, actually.
Now, I'm saying never and always here, and you understand, once in a great while, the Council on Wage and Price Stability got abolished. The Civil Aeronautics Board got abolished. That was the one that held airline prices high for consumers. Interestingly enough, the airlines were against abolishing this regulatory agency because it was protecting them from competition and holding prices high. But pretty much tyranny of the status quo. Once the program is on the books, that's the last time anybody questions it. The next year,
I mean, the more times he says this, the more examples I can think of that just prove the negative. Because there's certain things, there's certain things that once they're on the book, it gets really, really hard to question them. I mean, look at the Patriot Act. That was, that was sold as like this temporary emergency measure. We've got to just not have human rights for a while because, the Twin Towers and stuff. So we're just for a couple of years though, and then we're gonna go back to normal, and it'll be fine. You'll see. We're 24 years later. That shit's still that stuff is taken for granted. It's not even really discussed. But say, look at abortion rights. That was well established for a long time. And the ruling class, including the Democrats, one has to point out, who, at the very least, were very, very keen in the past 30 years not to be too heavily identified with it, even though they could have, they could have codified that stuff right now a number of times in the past several decades, and they've just refused to. And now that shit's gone. Like, it seems like when there are improvements that actually help, like, ordinary working people in particular, those never get to benefit from the tyranny of the status quo that Milton Friedman cares so much about.
Discuss whether its budget should be increased by 4% or 8%, but they don't discuss whether it ought to be ended.
Like, I mean, take the cops. Take ICE. I mean, that one benefits from the tyranny of the status quo. Even when politicians like AOC who go out there and say, "Oh, I want to abolish ICE," and then she wins her primary for the first time, and she says, "By which I mean I want it to be called something different. I didn't mean no deportations. Nobody means no deportations." And the people who voted for her were all like, "We meant no deportations." But she wasn't listening by that.
Now, there's an additional angle here I want to talk about, and that is the relationship between the state and war. At one level, you might think war is devastating to a state, after all.
I mean, it depends on how well the state did in the war.
Lose a war like the Nazis and be swept away and put on trial
and eventually get to run West Germany and NASA.
And that does happen. But a lot of times, war benefits the state. War brings the state more power. More tax revenue, more spending opportunities, more opportunities for regulation.
Now do capitalists... Do capitalists, I wonder if they also benefit from war, like especially the ones who sell the weapons. I'm sorry. I'm glad you were here, and I hope you feel better.
Lost freedoms. Just here in the United States in the 20th century, what did we see? We saw that World War I gave us conscription and the income tax. World War II gave...
I mean, the income tax came from other things as well. It's like, what he does, the whole thing is, the universe to him is just a collection of bubbles that never touch.
Gave us tax withholding. We got wage and price controls in World War II.
That's actually... I mean, that actually doesn't sound too bad. Price controls? Well, let's have those again. And wait a second, what were you telling us about the tyranny of the status quo? Because, like, the whole fucking New Deal has been rolled back massively. That didn't benefit from the tyranny of the status quo.
Prohibition comes out of World War I. The Patriot Act, the NSA spying, all comes out of the reaction to the 9/11 attack.
Well, I mean, the NSA spying was going on before that. There was Project Echelon way before 9/11. I was reading about it in the 90s. And that was already a project that had the idea of what they call a full take, of like surveilling all electronic communications inside and outside of the U.S. Now, it got massively expanded post 9/11, certainly. And, technological developments in the interim probably didn't hurt that either. But that was already going on.
In all of these ways, because people feel threatened, they're willing to give the government more power to tell them what they can drink or what they have to do with their money or spying powers. And usually those powers don't go away even when the war ends.
But... again, I mean, I can't help noticing that there's the powers that he talks about that do go away seem to fall in one category, and the powers he talks about that are never questioned again seem to fall into a very different category. I wonder if he notices.
So, classical libertarians have always understood war enhances the power of the state. War is bad enough in its direct effects. People die. Buildings are blown up. Crops are devastated. Those things are bad enough. But the additional problem is that the state gains vast new powers and it tends to hold on to them.
Again, it's like capitalists are right here just wondering, is he ever going to mention them?
People like the vast powers of the state, but they don't like the killing involved in war. They're decent enough people to think war is a terrible thing. You know, children die. So they've come up over the years.
Well, I mean, other people die too, and that's also bad.
With what is often called the moral equivalent of war. Okay, we're not actually going to war, but the energy crisis, the drug crisis, the war on poverty.
I mean, speaking of another one that never really happened, but I mean, it's interesting that he throws that in there. Oh, I mean, that's so terrible that somebody would want to like eradicate poverty. You know,
all of those things can be used as excuses to organize society essentially in a warlike manner.
I mean, it's interesting the way he's saying this, because he avoids really saying exactly what he means. But, I mean, it just reminds me of the sort of critique that you heard. It's in Britain, they call it the spirit of 45. You know, all these workers are coming back from the war, and, you know, they're leaving the war work that they were doing if they were on the, you know, on the home front or whatever. And they're looking at the way the economy and the society was organized during the war, and a lot of them were saying, well, you know, if we can do that in order to have a big fucking war, why can't we do that, you know, use that exact level of organizing, that exact level of concerted effort and coordination and everything to say, make sure that everybody living in East London has indoor plumbing and electricity. You know, make sure that everybody can go to the fucking hospital if they need to, and stuff like that. And see, for some people, those are, you know, morally different things, you know, like fucking killing people versus maybe having health care and decent places to live and stuff. But to this guy, it's the moral equivalent of war. It's like, for him, it's just as bad.
William James, about a century ago, talked about the moral equivalent of war as a way to bring discipline and fortitude and patriotism and conformity to American youth, get some sense knocked into them. In more recent times, we did see President Carter's energy crisis. What was that about? It was about huge new regulations to make people accept that they were going to have to wear sweaters and sweat a little in the summer. Because
I mean, it had something to do with the fact that there was a threatened oil embargo, and oil companies decided to use that as an opportunity to massively scare up prices.
We didn't have enough energy. Turns out we have plenty of energy, but President Carter liked the idea that people would get patriotic and they would wear sweaters and they would wear T-shirts in the summer.
I mean, I think people were already wearing T-shirts in the summer in the Carter years. I mean, I've seen pictures. There were lots of T-shirts. I don't think they needed fucking Jimmy Carter to tell them to try that.
The equivalent of war brings more power to the state without actually having to suffer the devastation and the grief that war itself brings. That's why, in a sense, it is the apotheosis of all these processes I've been talking about. If you can convince people we're in a struggle for national survival, whether that is against the Nazis or just against energy shortages, then you can persuade people to give up all sorts of freedoms, to give more power to the government, and then people in the government are able to...
I mean, there is some truth to this, I want to say. I mean, it is very, very easy to just hit these things for six. And I'm enjoying doing that. But of course there is some truth to this. But I mean, it grates that he talks about this. I mean, it's not really surprising that he talks about it this way, but it's like the just gaping hole that is, like, where the hell are capitalists in all this? Like, you have all, you know, where are all the people who own basically everything in all of this. He talks about this as if they're in the same relationship with the state as all the rest of us are.
This additional
and of course they're not.
There's often an assumption that if you're in the private sector, you're self-interested.
I mean, like, literally, that is the fundamental assumption of pretty much all capitalist economics. It's homo economicus.
But that's a terrible thing, but let's face it, if you're in a business, then you're self-interested. Whereas if you go into the government, then you're not self-interested, you're public interested. And it was the public choice economists who first said, really? Just because you graduate and go to work...
Like, if you're going to do those close-ups, whoever edits these, make sure you get his face in focus, because that just gave me a headache.
General Motors, and you graduate and go to work for the Department of Transportation, suddenly you're a selfish egoist and you're an altruist? That doesn't really make any sense.
I mean, it is a massive oversimplification, but it is also a straw man.
What if we assume that people in the government are self-interested just like people in the private sector? What would we observe? We would observe their aggrandizing more power to them.
I mean, and again, it is all completely individualized. It's just people's individual self-interest. Like, there are no, there's no structural power going on. There's no overlap. Like, remember, taxpayers and consumers are two completely different groups of people.
Oh, and that is...
And the elderly, like, that is just this, we don't know where they came from. They're like, they're aliens, like the homeless. They're just sort of this discrete group, and they have interests and what happens with them is nothing to do with anyone else. So we talk about them like they're in this sort of bubble, because everybody's in a little bubble. It's bubbles all the way down.
We would observe they're building the bureaucracy that reports to them, and that is what we observe. Seems like the public choice economists demonstrated that making government more powerful is indeed what bureaucrats and politicians have in mind.
Again, I mean, it's like, yeah, he speaks of this in the abstract, and even his own examples run counter. Like, it isn't, because it's interesting how government keeps getting more powerful in recent years. Under, like, the sort of neoliberal system that public choice theorists, would kind of generally prefer. And yet, the state keeps on getting massively powerful, but it's getting powerful in a very specific sort of way. And it has, it is increasing its repressive power, it's increasing its power to make it, to facilitate exploitation and, acquire access to resources in countries where people perhaps thought that they might like to use them for themselves. And all that sort of shit. But when it comes to things like maybe dealing something about a public health crisis, nothing. Something about maybe having a functioning healthcare system, no, the government can't handle that. Disaster relief, what are you talking about? We don't know how to do that.
Fortunately, we do have a constitution. We do have an occasionally alarmed citizenry that prevents them from doing everything they would like to do. But when we talk about there should be a government program for that. There should be a program to feed children. There should be a program for free student loans.
Well, I mean, why would you need them to be free? Why would you need student loans if it was, why not just have, like, fucking publicly funded education rather than, I don't know, rather than this admittedly brilliant idea of having higher education financed off the backs of insolvent 18-year-olds taking on lifelong debt.
There should be a government program to help with poverty in the third world. We need to recognize politicians and bureaucrats will administer that program.
We also need to notice that there, like, most of the programs he just listed are things that the government is extremely resistant to. The entire political class is extremely resistant to. And that's very interesting, because when it comes to programs to line the pockets of rich people, they love those kinds of fucking government programs.
You ever seen a picture of Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid? When you say the government should do X, you're saying Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell.
I mean, I have a feeling there's probably more people in the government than just them, though admittedly, the idea of them doing anything of importance to people's lives is kind of
that will be done.
Unsettling.
300 million people interacting in the market process. That is a reality that I think you have to accept. If you want bigger government, you have to agree bigger government is going to come with waste, lobbyists, politicization.
Wait, okay. Oh, and now do this with capital. Do this with capital, though. Because, I mean, obviously, when capitalists run things, there's no waste. You know, how when Apple makes their products so that they will break if you don't use the right home button that is made by an Apple licensed manufacturer, even though it is the same fucking button, they specifically spent money to design a code that is on there, that is read by a sensor that they put on there specifically for that purpose, just so that they will break your iPhone if you go and get it repaired, rather than sending it to them when it breaks, so that they can sell you an entirely new model. There's no waste in capital.
All of those sorts of side effects, and maybe you think it's worth it. Maybe national health insurance is worth having politicians in charge of our health care, but put that on the table.
I mean, politicians are in charge of that shit now. I mean, he talks about it like, first of all, like, politicians are not in charge of these things right now, but also without talking about who is in charge of them now. Like, politicians being in charge of my health care, which they already are to a great extent, would still be better than insurance companies being in charge of it.
That's what we're talking about.
Oh, we got the Q&A. This will be great.
So when you described how a lot of our citizenry views how government works, I couldn't help but be reminded of the Schoolhouse Rock song, I'm just a bill, you know?
Oh, of course he is, because that is such a unique insight right there, because he's the only one who really heard that. That isn't something that literally everyone who went to school in the U.S. in a certain generation, or possibly more, grew up with.
And I was wondering where that whole notion comes from.
Well, it's...
the notion of the song? I mean, the song is just literally the process as it's described in the Constitution. I mean, that's all that notion is.
It's a sort of democratic mythology, right? I mean, that's what we believe democracy is supposed to be. And so, yeah, we teach it in our schools, and our politicians give 4th of July addresses about it. It is what is in the civics book when you're in junior high school, maybe by college. The civic books are getting a little more realistic.
No, I mean, it depends which university you go to.
But yeah, it is, I think, a national mythology. We're democratic. We're not like the old system. We came to this country to create freedom and democracy. And part of the issue, of course, is...
I mean, that's bullshit, yes. I mean, it is, of course, bullshit.
It's the confusion in American thinking between liberty and democracy. As a libertarian, I'm in favor of liberty. I'm in favor of a free society in which people are free to come and go as they please.
Okay, now explain how... But he wants to combine this with capitalism, and he doesn't... He actually thinks he's figured out a way.
To eat what they want, and smoke what they want, and marry who they want, and work as they want, and refuse to work as they want. Spend their own money as they choose.
Right.
Everybody in America is basically in favor of that.
Well, yes, when you put it that abstractly. The thing is, of course, what the society, it depends on which people you're talking about. Like, if you want people to be able to work as they choose and refuse to work as they choose, well, it kind of depends which people you're talking about, what kind of society will allow that. Like, if you're talking about rich people, I mean, then, yeah, actually, basically, bourgeois society will do that just fine, won't it? I mean, because as long as you have money, nobody gives a shit if you work or not, really. If you're most people, though, you would actually need some fundamental transformations in order for that to even be a real option, because you need money in order to survive, and working is how you get it.
But they often call that democracy, and of course democracy means something different. Democracy is about how you make the rules, and the ideal system of democracy.
Well, I think the point they're making is that in a society that is democratic, there is, it's not, see, this is, these sorts of distinctions are the bread and butter of people who want to seem clever without actually doing the work to be clever. Because the thing is, there's more than one notion of what democracy even means. I mean, even within the concept of, like, sort of bourgeois capitalist democracy, I mean, there is democracy in terms of how you make the rules. But there's also democracy in terms of what that society looks like in which that's happening.
Democracy. Really?
God, I mean, it's like, this guy is apparently a published author. Well, that doesn't take much. Like, fucking J. Michael Bailey's a published author. I mean, they're like, he's in what's supposed to, this is called a lecture and everything. And this is supposed to sound like really serious theoretical work. And it is just on the same level as some of the shittiest Reddit comments.
It's kind of predicated on an assumption of this Greek arena. All the citizens, which, remember, of course, was basically the slave-owning Greek freeborn men at the time, but the idea that all the citizens go down into the arena, listen to the arguments, engage in deliberation, and then make a decision which will be implemented seamlessly by public-spirited bureaucrats. It's the mythology, and all sorts of aspects of the state talk about it that way. I think every American sort of knows it doesn't quite work that way.
Well, yes, and I think most probably also know that it doesn't really work quite the way that he's talking about either.
But it's still there as our background assumption.
Whose background assumption, though? But, okay, there we go. That was not a very... I was really worried that I was going to find that I was getting in the weeds with this, because I've not actually really looked into public choice theory. But that, I thought that... but that was just so fucking shallow that I really needn't have worried. Okay. Where shall we go? We've still got a fair bit of time. That one didn't take too long.
All right, welcome to the show, y'all. Got a big one today.
We've got Kyle Kulinski talking about these protests in Israel, which a lot of people really are completely overestimating the import of. Because the thing is, and I'm kind of curious whether... I don't really follow him, so I'm curious, whether he is going to actually get into what they are actually demanding and what they're not. Because one of the things that is, with these large protests, one of the things that is actually very consistent is that there is literally zero concern for what happens to Palestinians in Gaza. It is all about getting their POWs back, and they really don't give a shit what happens other than that.
We have some gigantic protests that erupted in Israel. We'll talk about that. We also have Trump betraying Ukraine with a disgusting offer that he made to Putin. I'll walk you through that as well. Fox News crashes out hard over Gavin Newsom and the fact that he's copying Trump. Hakeem Jeffries continues to humiliate himself with his lack of fight against MAGA. And later on...
I mean, I have to say, on a certain level, I'm glad that Hakeem Jeffries is there. Because the thing is, when, you know, the regime forces, you know, when the official political parties, when Democrats, in particular liberalism, seems to actually be offering answers, then it becomes much more difficult to push forward any kind of independent organizing and challenge it. But when they're unable to sound even remotely credible, it becomes much easier on a certain level to actually say, well, because people won't just immediately flock to them, and indeed the polls say people are not. People absolutely fucking detest Trump, and they think things are going badly, but the Democrats do not register as an opposition, which means that actually there is a very clear opening for us to come in and say, yeah, well, here are some ideas that you maybe have not actually heard before, but they might be worth trying out. Maybe they will actually help.
People apparently are not having sex in the United States anymore. Okay. Weird, but we'll talk about that. And also, other vices are apparently...
Well, I mean, obviously everyone goes to Canada to have sex.
On the decline. We'll dive into all that, smoking, drinking, you name it.
You mean stuff that costs money.
You guys know the drill. Everybody, please do me a big favor. Sub to the channel. That helps out big time and costs you nothing at all. Thank you to everybody who supports the show on Patreon. We couldn't do it without you. That link is below if you'd like to help out. You can also sign up for Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. That link is also below. And go subscribe to the Corin's World YouTube channel where Corin and
I'm going to skip
And so that's one area where there's a huge disagreement. They want to resettle all of Gaza. And so there's this big disc table by Hamas to return all... Clearly, the Israeli government does not give a fuck about the remaining hostages. They didn't care about the hostages the entire time.
True, absolutely. And they were very clear on it. I think probably people in chat, people watching this probably know this already, but just in case... the first offer was to return all the civilians back on the 9th of October 2023. The first comprehensive prisoner exchange deal that was being offered by the Palestinian resistance was a month later, a little bit more than a month later. The deal that the U.S. and Israel ultimately accepted in January 2025 was accepted by the Palestinian resistance in December 2023. They could have had all of them home a long, long time ago. And if they hadn't torn up the ceasefire that they never actually followed back in January to March of this year, they would have already been home. I mean, they were all being released.
Being honest, right? There were deals on the table by Hamas to return all the hostages within a week of October 7th, and Israel fucking rejected them.
I mean, within 2 days, literally within 24 hours... of Israel actually regaining control of the Gaza envelope settlements, there was already an offer. That's how soon it was. That is in the Israeli press. Haaretz has covered it.
Okay, so they don't care. But the population does, right? They care about the hostages. And so there's this big disconnect between the public and the government, where the government is putting first and foremost their religious extremism and their expansionism.
And above all, their desire to commit genocide, which happens to have majority support.
They want to create a greater Israel. They want to resettle all of Gaza. They want to take...
they want to. They want to do a lot of things. But I mean, the IDF was already telling them, their top brass were already telling them there was no way that shit was going to work. Because as much as Israel likes to claim to have operational control over, like, huge areas of Gaza, they don't. Like, operational control means you can walk around safely. You don't have to watch your back because you have cleared the area and there are no hostile forces. That is not the situation they're dealing with. The situation is that the resistance is everywhere. The resistance has eyes and ears everywhere. They've got surveillance. They got drones. They have tunnels. And there was a huge ambush in Khan Yunis just recently. Massive ambush out of a tunnel. And it turns out from the Israeli press, this was a tunnel that Israel said that they destroyed already once. It's already back. Because, I mean, it's just sand in a lot of these places. It is not a hard thing to dig in. And the resistance knows how to build a tunnel. They can get those things up and running pretty quickly, it seems.
For all of the West Bank. And they are prioritizing that.
In better days, perhaps there will be like international tunneling competitions, and they might actually show us all how quickly they can put together a usable tunnel that will actually last more than 5 minutes without collapsing.
Well above the hostages who they don't give a fuck about. And so the population does not like that. They want those hostages back. And so that's one area.
Well, I mean, the population as a whole does not care quite as much. There is a segment of the population that does, but I mean, it is by no means clear that that is a majority. There are a lot of people who want the captives back, the POWs. At this point, they are all military, but it's not really clear that they're the majority. There are a lot of people who don't give a shit either.
Where there's a huge disagreement between the Israeli public and Netanyahu.
From the numbers of people we have seen on the streets and in the...
I mean, he's really overstating the case. There is so much agreement, actually, between the public and Netanyahu and the government. And actually, it's not just Netanyahu. That's another thing we gotta watch out for here. Because actually, the so-called opposition is lockstep with this. They are also they've been co-signing this genocide from the start. Occasionally, they've had criticisms of exactly how it's being implemented, but they agree with it. You know, Yair Lapid has said that the society seems to be falling apart and they're on the brink of civil war, possibly. But on the whole, Benny Gantz is right out there defending the starvation policy by pretending that it doesn't exist, even as Israel brags about it. I mean, there is no meaningful political opposition in Israel, and that is also reflected in the public. Like, there aren't that many people who really give a shit about anything that happens in Gaza. As long as the result is there are no Palestinians left after.
We have tried to get through with some success because the streets are packed so densely. I think it's safe to say this is easily one of the largest, if not the largest, protests we've seen against the war since it started nearly 2 years ago, and it came together only in the last week.
I mean, even his chyron there actually puts it more accurately. Protesters demand hostage return. It isn't really anti-war. Like, that's the thing. If you bring the captives back, as far as they're concerned, yeah, they don't really care what happens in Gaza after that.
I do want to say, though, like, stop calling it a war. It is not a war. This is so far from a war. In order for it to be a war, both sides need to be capable of fighting.
The thing, okay, it's like, yeah, it's more accurate to say that there is a genocide and there is also a war. In fact, the term that is used, I hear from Palestinian sources and the resistance, they refer to Harb Ibada, which means genocidal war, because to acknowledge that there are two things going on here in parallel, very closely overlapping in time and space and in person. Namely, you have this genocide of the civilian population, but there is also a war, because the thing is, as much as like Western liberals and Israel in particular, they also do not really want to acknowledge it. But the Palestinians can fight. They have their resistance has actually been impressive in the field. They have, and in fact, like even 2 years into it, nobody, even people who are following this closely, who have been paying attention to Palestinian resistance and its development for years, don't understand how they can possibly have managed this, because they've managed to continue to field a fighting force the entire time, almost 2 years in, and they are actually carrying out more operations, more deadly operations for the occupation than they were at the start. Like, I mean, Israel is murdering civilians, and then the resistance shows up and attacks Israelis. It attacks the Israeli military, specifically. Blows up their tanks, blows up their APCs. I mean, in one operation that's captured on video, Saraya al-Quds actually monitored an Israeli drone was bringing in some explosives for some sort of operation. They thought they were dropping them in a safe zone that they had control over. They were wrong about that. Saraya caught where this load of explosives was dropped. Went to the warehouse, waited till dark, went into the warehouse, grabbed the stuff, took it back home with them to their bases to be used against the occupation. Like, so there is another side capable of fighting. If it were technologically equal, this thing would be over. If Israel did not have a fucking air force, this would be over, and it would not have ended favorably for the occupation. But there is another fighting force going on, present, and they are easily the best trained and most skilled of the lot. I was thinking NSYNC, right. But yeah.
What do you have, like...
He wants it that way.
7 Hamas people left with a handful of bottle rockets. We're going to call it a war.
That is just wrong. There are something like, I think, 40,000 fighters left. They don't have a handful of bottle rockets. They have anti-armor shells that they develop themselves, often using explosives from unexploded ordnance dropped by Israel, because the dud rate on their fuses is something like 20%, it turns out. So there's huge amounts of unexploded bombs all over the Gaza Strip. And these resistance sappers go in there, dismantle that stuff, and they shove it right back up Israel's ass. They have not... even Israel acknowledges there's been no difficulty, to the extent that they've had losses, and they have had significant losses, the resistance fighters. They have had no trouble recruiting. Like, their actual problem, the resistance, is that there are way more people who want to sign up and join the fight than they can meaningfully train or equip. And to call it's like bottle rockets, you don't need to do that. Because I see what he's trying to do, but it's also, like, it's just not true. The weapons they have are extremely effective, and they're very good at using them. Israel has lost more than half of their fucking tanks. They started out with, like, 3,000, 4,000 or something. They're down to, like, 1,300. And that is not from their invasion of Lebanon. Hezbollah... Actually, they in their final field report before the ceasefire happened, they said the total number of tanks they'd taken out was like 60. That means that all the rest of the tanks that have been lost by Israel were lost in Gaza. I mean, so you don't have to do that to point out that the forces are massively unbalanced, because fundamentally what it comes down to is air power. That is the difference. If Israel did not have this air force, they would not be able to do this genocide. And we should take that to heart, those of us who live in the countries that supply that air force, because that air force is not made in Israel. None of that shit is made in Israel. The bombs aren't made there. The planes aren't made there. None of it is. It's made here. It's made in Britain. It's made in Germany. It's made in the Netherlands. Though I think they might have had a court order that forced them to get out of it. So in that sense, if we know what we're doing, if we play our cards right, we can deny them that Air Force.
When the other side has 2,000-pound bombs, and they have every weapon known to man, and they're backed by the world's most powerful military in all of history.
And it still doesn't help them because they were never trained in fighting. They were never trained to fight, and it shows. And not only that, the latest thing, this was, if you watch the Electronic Intifada live stream, which I highly recommend, John Elmer was talking about, in the Israeli press, the Armored Corps are complaining that these troop carriers, the Namur troop carriers, their latest generation APCs, are having AC failures. Their air conditioners are broken. And it gets up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit in those things. Like, bread-proofing temperature, okay? So, they're popping the hatches. Because otherwise you could suffocate in that fucking heat. You'd get heat stroke. Because, you're in this fucking tin can with no AC and breathing each other's farts for however long. I mean, they pop the hatch. And the resistance is there when they pop the hatch. And they've actually, in the midst of all this shit, they have developed a whole new version of an explosively formed penetrator just to use for these open hatch situations, so they don't use up the ones that they stick on the outside of these armored vehicles to blast through the walls of them. Like, so we really, it's like, don't downplay. Like, Kyle, really, don't downplay the skill and actually the technological and engineering just fucking genius of this resistance. You don't have to do that to point out just how utterly imbalanced it is, because Israel isn't fighting against them. Israel is not fighting against the resistance. You see that from Israel's videos, you see that from the Palestinian resistance's videos. When Israel says that they're fighting, you don't see any fighters anywhere. It's just civilians. It's just unarmed people running and screaming and getting fucking murdered. When you look at the combat videos by the resistance, no civilians anywhere near. The area is fucking deserted. It is an apocalyptic hellscape of nothingness and ruin. And it's just the resistance and the IDF. So we have the confirmation from both sides that it isn't Israel chasing around Hamas, chasing around the Qassam brigades. It's the Qassam brigades chasing Israel.
It's not a war. This is a murder fest. This is a genocide. Stop calling it that. That's the subtle propaganda.
Yeah, they're trying to. The thing to remember, they want to send 6 divisions. That's what their brass said. And that is equivalent to 60,000 troops. Their divisions are of varying size, but the ones they're sending, their goal is 60,000 troops. That's what they're trying to call up from the reserves. But the trouble is, even the last time, huge amounts of reserves didn't show up. A lot of these people, when the ceasefire happened, a lot of them, didn't actually live there. They went there to join the genocide. They thought it was going to be over quickly because that's what they keep being told. Then they realized it wasn't, and they got to go home. The deployment ended, the ceasefire happened, and they fucked off back to, like, London or Paris or Toronto or wherever. So, and then there was another call-up, and there was, like, one brigade that was missing half its battalions as a result.
I can't get over. My autistic ass can't get over it.
Organizers from both hostage families as well as bereaved families from October 7th called for a grassroots nationwide
and tomorrow, Monica Lewinsky. That is so random.
Strike today, and it has taken place.
It's a lot of people.
Like, notice the flags here. Not a single Palestinian flag anywhere.
The entire day. There are hundreds, if not thousands, just around me right here. And the closer you get to Hostages Square, which is still a few hundred meters behind us, the more packed it gets. You may even be able to hear the noise from the chanting, the drums, the cheers. The chants from Hostages Square itself, and that gives you just a sense of how many people.
Yeah, like literally, not any reference to what happens to the people in Gaza. Nothing. There is no sign of concern. You might, if they follow the entire procession, you might find some people on the margins
9 this morning.
Because there are groups on the margins who are anti-war groups, and there are like literally legit anti-war, anti-Zionist groups, and you also have and not just to be clear, because a lot of people think anti-Zionist Jews, and I think that must be ultra-Orthodox, and that's not always. That is by no means always the case. In fact, that's not even mostly the case. But yeah, I mean. And you have, like, the refuseniks, the people, these young people who are going to prison rather than joining this genocide because they just reached conscription age. And there have been a bunch of those, but still nothing compared to, I mean, none of them would tell you that this is a significant movement in population terms, because it's not. They know they're just all alone in this, like, fucking 4chan hellscape.
The time of the Hamas-led attack from October 7th, so it is incredibly symbolic. It began with road closures at major intersections across the country as protesters and demonstrators blocked major intersections. From there, it grew and it spread. Throughout the day, we have seen protests across Israel demanding an end to the war, some calling for the end of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's time leading the country. That all led to a march, which we followed as it led to Hostages Square, and then the main event, packing.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, enough of them have come back, and like people who have come back, who have come home after a deployment, a lot of them absolutely, for all the stuff, all the fucking bravado and all the sick, fucked up, sadistic shit they'll do on TikTok, they get back and it's like, I don't want to ever go back there again. It's completely fucking broken them. Both just the horrible shit that they were doing, and therefore witnessed because they were in the process of doing it, and because of the fact that for the first time ever, for the first time probably in decades anyway, this is the first real prolonged like war of attrition kind of situation the IDF has ever been in, and they've always been keen to avoid it because they knew they weren't set out for it. And so you have this situation where their goons have to walk around with eyes in the back of their head. Yeah, I mean, I would say it's their Stalingrad, really. Because, I mean, just topographically, it is very similar. The reason a big part of why Germany lost Stalingrad is because the defenders' advantage in a devastated city like that is massive. It just creates, when you just raise a city to the ground, it creates all sorts of hiding places for the defense. Militarily, there is no justification for it because it is just actually literally a bad idea if you're the attacker.
Square. Organizers say there are 300, perhaps even 400,000 people in the square itself and blocking the surrounding streets, and that's why it's so easy to get a sense here.
Yeah, I mean, and I have to say, why aren't we having these fucking roadblocks? Like, these roadblocks could actually, I mean, especially if they were timed the right way, with a little bit of additional information, could actually, roadblocks like this, like we saw during, like, the heyday of BLM a few years ago, where I remember seeing the 101 freeway just completely stop, halfway down from where I was in Echo Park at the time. Like, that's the sort of thing that could disrupt the supply chain, especially if it was done for any length of time. That sort of thing, really, we ought to be considering it.
Of the energy of the calls for an end to the war and the demand to come to a deal to bring home the remaining 50 hostages, 20 of whom are still believed to be alive.
A lot of the population, I think, knows that this is now existential for Israel in the sense that, you've already lost the world, bro. The world is gone.
I'm kind of curious where he's going, because, I mean, there are definitely reasons that they would be thinking it's existential. Because, I mean, the social fabric is falling apart.
Like, if you look at young Americans...
But, I mean, I just noticed he is not talking about what these protesters are not saying so far.
Obviously, the entire left is done with Israel. Israel only has, like,
I mean, the entire left was done with Israel a long time. Long time ago over here. But, I mean, there are degrees of doneness. Ask anyone who works at a steakhouse. There are degrees of doneness. And I think the level of doneness now, it's so done that even Trump would eat it.
% support rate among Democratic voters. you're cooked. You're cooked among Democrats. Now it's both a thing about genocide, but it's also a rank partisanship thing where we see how Netanyahu coddles Trump's nuts, and like regular Democrats.
I mean, he does that to. The thing is, this is one of the problems where a lot of analysis falls down, because the thing is, Israel always sucks up in the ways that matter. But the thing is that it is understood that in order to play to the people at home, occasionally that will mean saying some shit. There's a bit of kayfabe. Like, Netanyahu will go out, say, like, Biden is Hamas, and all this sort of bullshit. When everybody knows Biden and him get on beautifully, and actually, in fact, his, like, foreign policy people were all saying, thank fuck we had Biden in there, because nobody would have ever given us a free hand like that.
Voters are like, oh, this guy's just like a Republican who's destroying everything in sight, right? So you have that, but then on the Republican side, yeah, young Republicans also hate Israel.
Yeah, there are some. But if you look at the numbers, the support, support for Israel amongst people who vote for Democrats is 8%. It's something more like 60 for people who vote for Republicans.
They do. And so it like TikTok, bitch, eventually when the younger generation takes over, who's going to have your back? Who's going to have your back? There was a top Israeli government official who said something like, if we lose the
Oh, well, I mean, the real problem... See, that's the thing. The assumption that that's necessarily going to change anything, I think, is also a mistake. Because we saw how the political class kind of deals with this public sentiment. And the way they deal with it is to manage it by pretending to be for a ceasefire. Everybody's for a ceasefire. Everybody wants to figure out how to get aid in. That's a challenge as opposed to a fucking phone call to say, yeah, open the crossings, the food's coming in, or you're not getting any more weapons ever. That is how you manage that level of opposition. You make it look like, ooh, look, we don't like what's going on there either, but we don't know what to do. Like, what could we do? We're just the people who provide the weapons. Like, how that isn't a position of power. We don't have leverage. We're as incompetent and dismayed and powerless as you all are.
We lose everything. And it's like, that's gonna happen. Like, it's only a matter of time, because you're not gonna get back all these young Republicans who see what you're doing in real time.
I don't like talking about this in terms of inevitabilities, because the thing is, if you were to look at polls, more generally, and if you thought that would immediately force a political result, yeah, Trump at this point is often, he says it in his, inimitably fucked up way, but it is basically a lot of the same stuff. The themes that he touches on are basically the same. But, if you think that polls, even, strong majorities in polls, automatically mean political results, you would be very disappointed. Because if polls worked like that, if public opinion worked like that, if that was the interface between public opinion and policy, then we'd have healthcare in this country. And I wouldn't have had to spend half of my early afternoon on the phone trying to sort out bullshit with United. But that's not how it works. There has to be struggle in there. It is because the thing is, the U.S. doesn't have any replacement for Israel. And fundamentally, at this point, part of the problem is there is no way to force Israel to pull their heads in that does not look like a defeat for Israel. And a defeat for Israel is a major slap in the face for the U.S. because the U.S. banks heavily on Israel's deterrent. That is, Israel's deterrent is a component of the U.S. deterrent. Moinsen. But, so the result, if you're like Al Capone and you send your lads around to pick up the protection money, and they get their asses kicked by, like, the bouncer at this pub or whatever. That's not just, you know, it's not just your lads who got their asses kicked. That's not just a them problem. That's a you problem, because that's disrespect to you. Naja, ist ja halb so wild, kannst du sowieso schon also im Kanal finden als Wort. And that's the same thing, because Israel is part of the U.S. deterrent, and Israel's deterrence isn't looking good. That means the U.S.'s deterrence isn't looking good. And, in fact, the U.S.'s deterrence isn't looking good. Look at Yemen. Yeah, Yemen didn't give a fuck when the U.S. started a war to try to stop the sanctions. And in the end, the U.S. capitulated. So, I don't think that there is some sort of fundamental law of physics that says that this is going to work out that way just because nobody likes Israel anymore. I mean, apart from just asshole people.
It's not going to happen. And so what I think a lot of the protesters realize is that what Netanyahu is doing here is existential for Israel, period. Where the whole fucking project can collapse. And perhaps it will.
I mean, another person who's really worth checking out on this very subject and provides a lot more detail, much more serious analysis than you're getting here or from Kyle there. I'm going to put it in the chat. Shir Hever. And if you look that up on YouTube, that name, you will find lectures, really detailed discussions of the degree to which, like, economically the country is hurting.
So that's why one of the things they're calling for is for him to step down. They want him to step down. They want the hostages returned. They want an end to the war, which...
Yeah, well, I mean...
It's a genocide. Let's stop calling it a war.
Oh, well, yeah, but the thing is, they're kind of cool with the genocide. In fact, if they got the captives back, most of them would be fine with whatever happens in Gaza. Like, look at those flags. It's all just Israeli flags. There's no one's burning an Israeli flag. Nobody's showing a Palestinian flag. Nobody is saying, you know, none of those placards were anything to do with what's happening to people in Gaza, and there were just polls recently on the starvation in Gaza, which now even the UN, which historically takes forever. Usually they don't actually will declare that a famine is there until after it's happened and huge numbers of people have already died. They are always very, very late to the game on that. And this is no different. Now they have officially declared it.
But they also want...
And 72% of Israeli Jews in a recent poll said they don't give a shit.
Netanyahu to step down. Which, look, we'll take it. Anybody who goes out there and applies pressure, anybody who tries to fucking get this horror show to stop, that's good. And there should be more of this happening. So
yeah, I mean, and this is the problem. He does not... Because this is not... If to think that these people want the horror show to stop really misunderstands these people. I mean, I think on this he's coming from the right place. Let me say that. There are people who we watch on here whose hearts aren't on the right place. I feel like his heart on this is in the right place, more or less. But his analysis isn't. His analysis is very superficial and is taking at face value that the people who are protesting because they want to get the POWs back actually give a shit what happens to anyone else, as opposed to just being racist enough that 50 people's lives are worth more than 2 million.
So roads were blocked, businesses shut down, nationwide protests, like massive strike going on. You saw the...
In fact, I mean, in Nazareth, largely Palestinian community, the local trade unionists said they weren't joining this strike because the strike was not, the demands for the strike said nothing about the starvation blockade of Gaza. It said nothing about saving the lives of the people there, nothing about, ending the genocide. And they said, our members, we're not gonna join a strike that completely ignores the real fucking crisis that's going on here, that ignores this genocide entirely.
Fires on the highway. I mean, this is next level type shit. The numbers I've seen go as high as low as 500,000 and as high as 1 million. And I even saw one that went as high as 2.5 million people across Israel. I don't know what the exact number is. I have no idea. But there was a number of different sites, and when you add it up between all of them, there's a lot of people that showed up.
No, yeah. I mean, of course, you have to be careful with adding it up between sites because they may have different figures, but they may have counted the same people.
A weekly cabinet meeting, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tried to dismiss the strike today, saying it strengthens Hamas and that it's the destruction of Hamas that's necessary right now.
Yeah, except that's not fucking happening.
Bro, he did the thing. There's only 2 reactions from...
And one thing to note, like, so the resistance they accepted yet another ceasefire proposal from the mediators. And this one, I mean, I read it as the ultimate attempt to call a bluff and just prove once and for all that Israel does not give a shit about ending this genocide. Because they agreed to all sorts of things that absolutely are just suicidal to agree to, and that you would never want to agree to if you thought that this was actually going to be taken seriously, like allowing Israel to maintain the occupation of the so-called Philadelphia corridor, which they used to block the Rafah crossing, like allowing the GHF killing fields to be maintained there, and a bunch of other things like that. And I think the only reason they would have done that is because they know Israel doesn't give a fuck and they're not going to accept it anyway. And they want to be able to show the world and, to the Israeli public, because they do engage with, like, the settler population. They do actually produce propaganda material that is specifically meant to talk to them, to say, you're being lied to about how this is going. You're being lied to about what this is about. Sometimes if you watch, like, Resistance News Network on Telegram, you will see some of the videos they produce in Hebrew that are specifically meant to engage with that public and engage them on the things that they think are most likely to actually reach them. And pointing out that actually no matter what you offer, short of just the death of all Palestinians, Israel is not going to accept it, is, in that sense, a very powerful move. And on a certain level, I just kind of fucking hope they don't accept it, because, like, accepting that is just accepting genocide.
Zionists. You're an anti-Semite, or you're Hamas. Right? That's all they got. Anti-Semite or Hamas. And here, you're calling Israelis in the street. They're helping Hamas. Oh my God, they're so
If only
fucking lazy.
Well, like, I don't think it's lazy. I think they haven't got anything anymore. This is all they've got. They've run out of material. They ran out of material a long time ago. And so now it's just like, okay, they just have like a fucking dartboard and they throw it there. Okay, we're going to call them Hamas. Oh, no, wait, that's kind of on the borderline. I guess we're going to call them anti-Semitic or ISIS. No, we're not calling them ISIS because we openly acknowledge that we're working with ISIS in Gaza and we have constructive relations with ISIS in Syria. So, okay, we're going to go with Hamas or anti-Semitic, I guess. Fix the dartboard, will you? I mean, I think they've just... I don't even... Because it's like, at a certain point, there isn't much you can do with it. And at a certain point, there isn't all that much time to go. And we have reached the point where that is the case here. Thank you to everyone who joined in. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I will be back tomorrow night at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And I look forward to seeing you then. If you really, really, really enjoyed the stream and you would like to support me, I would really, really, really appreciate it. And here's where you can do that. I've just dropped the link in chat, and that is always a very big help to me. Helps me continue my projects, helps me sort of continue my biological processes in general. And so it is always very much appreciated. Have a good night and see you tomorrow.